Hello noble ones and welcome to Metatron's Academy. So today I found one of those videos from the 19th century that we often review, and usually we do that from a linguistic standpoint, and so will we today, but entering a little bit the realm of social linguistics too, and this topic can be a little bit spicy. Let's have a look. Okay, so the video in question is from the channel Life in the 1800s, and by the way, since we often review the videos that they upload, please consider checking them out, giving them a like, leaving them a comment, possibly subscribe. Anyways, the title is Man Describes Surviving an Indian Battle in 1868, Wild West Enhanced Audio. So already in the title, we have the usage of a word that today has been mostly abandoned. The word Indian, specifically to refer to what we now call Native Americans. What I'm going to do, let the video play and let him speak for maybe a minute and a half, so you can skip that if you want, but let's listen to him, let's see how he uses the word, and then we'll do a deep reflection onto ethonyms, why and when the word Indian was created and used, why there was a shift into the now more commonly utilized Native American, and ultimately what makes a people native.
The exploits of American scouts and soldiers on the plains have an endless fascination to every American, young and old. Tonight I have the very special honor of introducing a fighting man of the old Indian Wars and of the Civil War as well, Corporal Leander Heron, retired, Company A, 3rd U.S. Infantry, now living at St. Paul, Nebraska. Corporal Heron, now in his 85th year, is one of the few men still alive who helped in the defense of the old Santa Fe Trail. He fought, worked, and played with Wild Bill Hickok and Deadwood Dick, and is the only man in the state of Nebraska who holds the Congressional Medal of Honor. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Corporal Heron, who will tell you about that bit of Indian history which won him his coveted decoration. Corporal Heron.
Thank you, Captain Rickenbacker. Back in the 60s, Fort Dodge, Kansas, was a distributing point for supplies along the Santa Fe Trail. We were fighting with the Indians all the time, and my hardest scrap with them took place near Fort Dodge in September 1868. That was 62 years ago, but I remember it as clearly as if it had happened but yesterday. One evening, the commanding officer at Fort Dodge ordered me to choose a comrade and carry dispatches to Fort Larned, 75 miles away. I was a young fellow then, and I felt honored by the assignment. Because such well-known scouts as Wild Bill Hickok, California Joe, and Apache Bill were at the fort and might have been chosen. We could see the Indians signaling with smoke and fire on the hilltops in all directions. And that meant trouble. So I picked Patty Boyle, a tried and true friend, and a brave man to come along with me.
That sounds like a tough assignment, Corporal.
Okay, so now it's the interviewer who's providing some commentary, so I would like to provide some commentary myself. Quite a few things already. We've only listened, skipping the little music, we only listened to a couple of minutes. Isn't it fascinating when he says the 60s, back in the 60s, but he means 1860s. Goodness gracious. So if you noticed, he uses the term Indian both as an adjective and a noun, and he is describing the battles and obviously confrontations between Americans as they were fighting, I imagine, for control of territory with the natives. Now, I don't know about you, but the term Indian is not just something that was used in America. Even back in Europe, when I was a child, and I remember up to in middle school, it was just the way you refer to Native Americans, Indians, or American Indians. Definitely was common all the way up to the 90s, at least. The linguistic and semantic shift, therefore, is relatively recent, which allows us an opportunity to examine it in detail. We lived through it. However, if we really want to get technical about it, the shift isn't complete yet. What I mean by that is that even though in common parlance, TV, everyday interactions, most people don't use American Indian anymore, the term still has some legal usage, particularly I think when it comes to census. Just to mention one, I think there is a federal law that is called, and I have it here, Indian Child Welfare Act. So the term is still in use, at least in some contexts. Now, we have already explored in the previous episode of the series, and I'll put a link in the description, how sometimes some terms are shifted through one or two generations because they become derogatory in nature. One example would be the usage of the word Oriental, which, as an Italian, it is not derogatory in any way, shape, or form, but in the Anglosphere, it has become to be, and therefore, it isn't really used anymore. And some of that could apply to American Indian as well. But one thing we do have to underline is that probably one of the reasons why it's been changed is the simple fact that it is ultimately incorrect. They're not from India. And the connotation might be in connection to the early misinterpretation of the discovery of America from a European perspective. Well, initially, the original destination was indeed supposed to be India. Hence, the misnomer. So personally, even though sometimes I do resist when some terms are removed and I don't feel that there is a reason for it, in this case, I'm not against it. I mean, they're not from India, so why are we calling them Indians? With some reservation, as I have to say. Thinking back at the good old times when we would buy with my dad the little soldiers and we would take turns to play, I think we would all say, let's play cowboys and Indians. I don't think anyone has ever said, let's play cowboys and Native Americans. It just sounds weird. It's like one of those exceptions where, you know, the whole situation between, oh, it's French fries. No, it's chips. So Americans say French fries, British people say chips, and yet no one says, let's have some fish and French fries. Like even Americans call it fish and chips at that point. Anyways, this is just the first thing that I wanted to say. I'm going to let him speak for another little bit, and then we're going to dive into the usage of the term native and natives. And in fact, we might go into other subcategories such as Aboriginal, for instance. But let me tell you this much. I think at one point it would be great to actually have a Native American on the platform, on the channel here, and ask them, what term do you prefer? I would be interesting to hear that. And I wonder if they would actually pick between American Indian and Native American, or if they just would choose the name of their tribe, for instance. I'm not a Native American, so I haven't got a clue. All right, tell me about this battle, sir.
It was, Captain. But that night, we managed to sneak out of the fort and were well on our way when up near Little Coon Creek, we heard rifle fire and the blood-curdling yells of the Indians. We swung away from the trail, and there, huddled in a ravine, were 4 men and a mule team. The crack and flash of rifles around the edge of the ravine showed that the Indians had been in a pocket. We were on an important mission. Our orders were to proceed to Fort Larners with all possible speed, but I just couldn't see those white men massacred. So we spurred our horses and cut through the circle of Indians and joined the little group in the ravine. I sent Boyle, who had the best horse, back to the fort for help. The brave fellow plunged down the ravine, which opened out on the plains, and although it was night, the Indians somehow saw him and went whooping after him.
Okay, here's another one. So he used a term, of course, he said white men, and this is, of course, a term that we all use. But I would like to focus on the opposite of that. Think about it. Black people,